Afternoon. I'd like to reconvene the regular session of the Board of County Commissioners meetings. It's still Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. We have just returned from an executive session where no decisions were made. Our next item on our agenda is number 11, our public works item. We have a work session on the Clean Lane Resource Recovery Facility. We have Dan Hurley and Jeff Orlandini and our counsel Tiffany Johnson at the table. And I'm thinking Dan's going to look for some slides and he might head that up. So take it away, Dan, anytime you're ready.
Got it. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So we wanted to continue the conversation around the Clean Lane Resource Recovery Facility to bring the board and the community up to date on what's been happening with the project and where we're at. We do have 3 contracts following this work session that we're requesting your approval so that we can continue to move forward with this project. The first slide I have for you here is a timeline of the major board actions that led to where we are today. Starting back in 2015, the county established a 63% recovery goal, and that was codified in Oregon revised statutes in collaboration with the Department of Environmental Quality. In 2019, we developed and the board adopted the county's solid waste management plan that established waste processing as a future goal and outcome. In 2020, the board adopted the climate change strategy for Lane County, which included goals for reducing emissions from county operations. This report identified the Short Mountain landfill as the highest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions from county operations at 77%, and it recommended an anaerobic digester to reduce emissions from the landfill waste. In 2022, we issued an RFP, and through a competitive process, Bulk Handling Systems was selected to develop a waste recovery facility to meet our 63% goal. In 2023, the board approved moving forward with bulk handling systems to construct and operate a waste processing facility, to increase solid waste fees to support this facility, and to purchase a property in Goshen to build the facility. In 2024, the board approved $35 million in financing for the facility and delegated authority to the county administrator to sign the necessary agreements with the subsidiary of Bulk Handling Systems, BHS Projects LLC, related to a lease of the property we had purchased in Goshen for operation of the facility. And then in 2024, the board approved an alternative contract method called CMGC, Construction Manager General Contractor, for soliciting for the construction and then ultimate construction of the facility. Second slide here is another timeline, but this is of the land use pieces of this. But prior to this project, developing Goshen was a high priority of the board. The board set a goal that by 2017, Lane County would transform existing industrial land in Goshen to support increased levels of development, resulting in jobs that pay no less than 150% of the median wage. And in 2013, the board went through a land use process to develop a plan for Goshen. It was called the GREAT Plan, which stood for the Goshen Regional Employment and Transition Plan. As part of that process, we obtained a Goal 14 exception from the state. Sorry, I've got my box blocking my words here. That went through DLCD to get that, to upzone rural industrial land in Goshen to support urban levels of industrial development. So at that point, the property that we have since purchased was rezoned from rural industrial to Goshen-specific light industrial zoning. In 2022, working with Bulk Handling Systems, we developed a 30% design contract. We were originally trying to develop this project at the Short Mountain landfill. However, the part of the property where we were looking at developing that, one, it had some problems because it would be in the future landfill footprint, but also would need to be excavated into the side of the mountain that Short Mountain is named for, Short Mountain. And it was looking at very high excavation and retaining wall costs to move forward in that location. So we started looking at other properties and started looking at Goshen, knowing that that would be a good site with proximity to the landfill and in between Eugene and Springfield, and also the desire to fulfill the board goal to develop in Goshen. We found a property. We actually looked at a couple different properties. One was zoned Goshen Industrial and one was zoned light industrial, and ultimately moved forward with a purchase and sale agreement for a 26-acre parcel that was zoned light industrial. We believed that we might need to do some rezoning work on that property because there is a provision in the LI zone against waste-related uses. In 2023, following approval of the project by the board, the county purchased that property for $1.5 million. In 2024, we started through the land use process to rezone that parcel from light industrial to the previous zoning of rural industrial. However, with further evaluation of the zoning options, felt that it would be best in the current zoning of light industrial, because we found that recycling operations, which is the primary use for the facility, is not considered a waste-related use by code. The planning director agreed with this assessment, and when we filed a special use permit, that was approved. However, there were 6 appeals that were filed against the approval. So our next step with land use is to have a public hearing. We're contracting with an independent hearing official that will be outside of LCOG. This will be a future decision by the board to contract for that hearing official. The hearing will be held on January 14th, 2025.
Supposed to be February?
Sorry, what did I say? Oh, sorry. Oh. February 14th, 2025. Thank you. The next slide here has a summary of where we're at in the design for the project. We've been working with Bulk Handling Systems to develop this design, moving through a 30, 60, 90. We're approaching the 100% design. One of the contracts that will be before you after this work session is to approve what should be the final amount on that contract to get us to the 100% design of $187,400. So that brings the total to almost $3 million. And just for some awareness of what's standard for a construction project, a general rule of thumb is about 10% of the overall construction cost, plus or minus 5%. This puts us really right there in that ballpark. 30 million, 10% of that gets us at 3 million. So we feel that this has been handled well with the expense of the design. We have agreed in the processing and service agreement for the project to deliver the project according to a schedule of performance. That we're already sliding on that schedule because we don't have the permits that we need for land use and for wetlands, but we have applied for those things, and now we're working on the construction side of it to secure the GMC contractor and have the project management support to be able to deliver the project according to this schedule of performance. If things all went by plan and we got all those permits, the construction will be wrapping up around January of 2026. The next set of slides are slides that we've shown a couple times to you about just an overall view of the project. Nothing has changed with that. This project is still trying to deliver a state-of-the-art processing facility that will take commingled recyclables and waste, process that waste, take food waste out of the waste and go to an anaerobic digester to produce renewable natural gas, and to be a showcase facility for visitors and school groups to show better ways of handling our waste for the state and beyond. Again, this is a public-private partnership with a subsidiary of Bulk Handling Systems. We were hoping to be able to construction open within 18 months when we made that decision previously. The agreement requires us to deliver 120,000 tons of waste to the facility. There are guarantees in the agreement about how much waste will be diverted, and it's a 25-year term on the contract. This project would add about 20 years of life to the landfill, which currently has about 70 years, and a reminder that this is a big savings to the community over time. That space is worth over $330 million. Also, just for context, the nearest landfills are likely to close probably in less than 15 years now. We're probably closer to 10 or 12 years. The incinerator that Marion County used recently shut down. That waste is now going to Coffin Butte landfill, which is going to expedite the time that landfill will close if they don't get an expansion approved, which is proving to be difficult for them. And as we delay costs for landfill development, that's a savings for the Waste Management Division. It will help with recycling in our community because everything will go through processing to be recycled and make commodities available locally. There are the greenhouse gas reduction benefits of this project, which include decreasing over 88,000 tons of CO2 equivalent, which is about this equivalent of taking 30,000 cars off the road. And it will produce a product, renewable natural gas, available in the community. We've heard that LTD may be interested in this gas, but I think there are a lot of consumers for this product that would like to be able to capture the negative carbon intensity of the RNG under the Oregon Clean Fuels Program. This is a project that will have a strong local impact with the construction jobs related to it, over $135 million construction value, and it'll generate over $272 million in regional economic activity, employing over 190 employees through the construction part of it, and another 65 employees over the next 25 years. And again, we're trying to have this be an anchor facility for Goshen to achieve that prior goal of the board. And that concludes my slides for there, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Director Hurley. Any one of the board have any questions or comments for Director Hurley to open up this work session? Yes, Commissioner Farr, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Director Hurley. Good presentation. I love the timelines that show, each of the timelines that you put up there give us a clear illustration of how we got to where we are at this point in time. And today, this is where we are, looking at 3 contracts that we're being asked to approve today. I have a question about those contracts before we get into the discussion on each of them independently. But to the point of the land itself, a couple of quick questions regarding the Goshen property. We're not assured that that's going to meet, that's going to be approved ultimately. Is that correct?
That's correct, Commissioner. With those 6 appeals, they will be heard by the hearings official. We will present our arguments. They will present theirs. The public can also provide comment, I believe, at that time. And the hearings official will make a decision. That decision could then be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals and beyond into the courts.
With an interminable length of time, we can guess, but it's hard to say how long that would take. Then a question along a follow-up question on that. If it were to come to pass that that land's not approved, what's our next step?
Commissioner, we will need to explore options at that point to see what we can try to do to obtain the necessary land use approvals for that site. That may be considering other zoning for the site, such as a public facilities zoning, and moving through that rezoning process, which could also be appealed in similar fashion.
Okay.
We also may want to look at other potential properties if that's something the board wants to consider.
And in the interim, are we busily, not busily, but we're paying diligence to looking to see where those properties might be at this point in time? And while we're hoping, expecting that we get the zone change and that we do get the land use approval, the prudent thing is to, what do we do? How do we punt? Should we have to punt?
Commissioner, I think after the hearing on February 14th, I think we'll have a better sense of whether we think it will be ultimately approved and start planning our options after that. Okay,
very good. Then the next question that I have is regarding the time, the time it may take. We've all seen what has happened to the price of eggs. Now that's a silly thing to say, but things inflate in cost, and we have in September of last year, we estimated the construction cost to be $35 million was kind of the number we don't know what number's going to come in on that. Do we have a plan in place if that cost comes in higher?
Commissioner, we don't have a definite plan in place. The only funds for this project are currently the Waste Management Division's funds. There was a specific fund set up for this project, excuse me, that would take the fees that were raised on tonnage to start building a fund there, along with the money that will be financed. Beyond that, there's the enterprise fund of waste management and the reserves that they have there. However, it is not coming in where we had hoped. We're seeing declining tonnage coming into the landfill that's causing some financial stress on the division right now.
Okay. And that's a matter for concern, of course. And do we have a plan in place as to what if tonnage continues to decline?
We don't have a plan in place, and that will need to be a discussion with the board.
Okay, very good. Then next question along those same lines, and nothing to do with the contracts that we're approving today. We have 3 contracts that we're looking at, and these questions are generally about our position on the timeline in the project from start to finish. The $35 million number, I'll use that number, that's the number we're waiting to see what that number is once the contractor comes back with their estimates, maybe higher, maybe lower, maybe exact. We don't know at this point in time. I don't anyway. But we've spent money on the property, 1.5. There's some money that it is wetlands, so we'll have to mitigate, right? And I believe the estimate on that is it someplace around $1 million to mitigate?
About $1 million, yes.
About $1 million, which is a little lower than I'd anticipated and lower than I'd even been not led to believe, but what I'd been told. So there's that million, so that's 2.5 million. And then there are the costs that we're looking at on the board here today, the costs of the contracts to approve today, and the subsequent contract that's coming up in March that'll take it up to 2 million for the final design, for the 100% design. So I'm roughly grabbing numbers on about $4 million-ish there. Where did that money come from?
That money came from the Waste Management Division's enterprise fund that's generated from tipping fees, the fees that people pay when they dispose of their waste or when haulers bring their waste to the landfill. We had built up a reserve for future projects specifically for this and other projects that the division wants to pursue, but it would be coming out of that, it has come out of that Waste Management Fund.
So what you'd say is prudently, we had a reserve for future landfill expansion or whatever it may be, use on the improvement of our solid waste collection facilities, whatever it may be. And that's where, basically where that money's coming from that reserve, which, is there a plan to replenish that reserve or a need to replenish that reserve?
There will be a need to replenish that. We have other projects, such as improvements to the Cottage Grove Transfer Station, but then there are other reserves that the Waste Management Division holds for future development of the landfill, closure of the landfill, and then post-closure care. Those are separate from the reserves for future projects that I was discussing.
And these are kind of questions that'll come up down the road as we move a little bit further down toward the final construction date. And, you know, they'll probably need a little bit more exploration as we move down the road as to how they're being funded, how much it is, because many of these items, we don't even know what the cost is at this point in time. Once the project is completed, and I've stated over and over again, I've imagined myself driving up Interstate 5 and looking off to the left and seeing this facility here and telling my grandchildren, that is where the stuff we put in that garbage can gets turned back into products, roughly saying. But, you know, I mean, it's going to be something to be proud of. We have a business plan regarding operating that facility. And that business plan is dependent on a product stream, a refuse stream. And that's based upon numbers that we projected a couple of years ago, I think, and those numbers are diminishing at this point in time. So there's a possibility that those numbers we may not meet our business plan numbers based upon the trash stream that's coming in based on the assuming the original projections that we had. The other question that I have regarding the product, not the inflow but the output, the methane gas that we produce there, and it's going to be substantial. I mean, we're going to be capturing it in a very efficient fashion, releasing very little into the atmosphere, which does everybody, this generation and next generation, is a great deal of good. The market for that methane gas, are we confident in the market that we'll be able to sell that on a regular basis?
So a few things there, Commissioner. So first, the declining tonnage, yes, that is coming in lower than we'd anticipated a couple years ago. Sanapac in Springfield has started exporting waste down to the landfill that their parent company, Waste Connections, purchased near Medford, the Dry Creek landfill. And just a few months ago, EcoSort, which is also owned by Waste Connections, has started sending their waste out of county to the Dry Creek landfill. So that's what's impacting the declining tonnage. If that continues, I think the board would want to have some further discussions about what they should do about that, or as far as raising fees or what that should look like specific to Springfield residents. Also, there's the potential to look at this as a regional facility, which we haven't done before. Due to this waste crisis that's looming of the nearest landfills around us closing over the next 15 years, there's going to be a real need in the region for other places for those communities to bring waste. So we are already in discussions with Benton County and a few other counties that are forming a regional waste discussions group to explore possibilities. So I think that'll be a future discussion by the board if we want to replace that tonnage with tonnage from out of county. Okay. Related to the biogas, there will always be an economic value in that gas, just like there is for natural gas. Right now, that there's a high value for the biogas. As far as where that will go in the future, that's hard to say, particularly given the rapid changes in federal policy that we're experiencing right now. But I do think under the Oregon Clean Fuels program, Oregon has control over that, and there's a high value for that gas.
Well, that's a good response. We have a business plan in place, but we're prepared to make whatever adjustments need to be made to that business plan to make sure that the product is a business plan that works for continued ongoing operation of the facility. And as we move into the construction of the facility, we are waiting for the construction cost from, is it Essex Construction that we're waiting for? And we're expecting, well, we'll see what that is when it comes. So the point I'd like to make is that as we move forward at this point in time, we're approving 3 contracts today. We're asked to approve 3 contracts today, which is a part of the ongoing process. But as we go down the road, more questions will arise. Some questions that we can't even speculate on what the answers are. What's going to happen to the price of steel, for instance? And I can't ask you to answer that question because how would you possibly know? But what I want to have, the understanding that I want to have is that as we encounter what are going to be increases in cost of the facility, of building it and then operating it, changes in our business plan, that we will keep the public completely aware of what's happening at all times. The questions will be answered as to where is this extra $9 million coming from? Whatever it may be. I just threw out a number right there. So that we'll operate in complete clarity, because my greatest fear, as I outlined 1 week ago today, my greatest fear is the risk to the people of Lane County, not to this Board of Commissioners, not to Lane County government, but to the people of Lane County. We have a $330 million asset that we're sitting on, which is Short Mountain. We want to make that a better asset, and we want to be able to improve the way we handle the waste that goes into that asset, and that's what we're shooting to do. That's why we went down this path to begin with, is because we want it to be better for future generations. I want to make certain that we're aware of whatever risk it is for those future generations, that we're not going to be able to do exactly what it is that we would like to do, improve Short Mountain without overly burdening, whether it be by cost or ultimately even maybe by loss of the asset for the future of Lane County. So as the questions come up as we move along, I know you're prepared for legitimate questions from me, from the public, from other commissioners, whatever it may be, to make certain that the public is fully aware of the risk that we are taking, the calculated risk that we are taking as we move forward with the project. And I think you've given that assurance. So, that's my questions for this moment in time. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Yes, Vice Chair.
Yes. Sorry about that. Thanks, Director Hurley. We hit on a couple questions earlier, but one of my questions is why is Northwest Natural not a partner in this project anymore? Originally, they were named as a partner.
Vice Chair, I believe that bulk handling is in conversations with Northwest Natural, but they, to my knowledge, are not, haven't signed an agreement. So I'm just not sure where that's at. But we are not in direct communications with them because BHS Projects will own the gas and will do those agreements with whatever entity that is. But regardless, it would likely need to, if Northwest Natural doesn't want the gas or doesn't enter an agreement, it would likely need to flow through their pipeline. So there would need to be some agreement there. But we have folks here from bulk handling if you want to get into that discussion further. But that's my knowledge.
Okay. Well, yeah, I received a phone call from their regional director, saying that they had no interest in the gas for a lot of reasons, as Eugene tried to ban natural gas. So they're concerned about partnering up that way. How many, you mentioned LTD, how many LTD buses are running natural gas still?
I'm not sure how many they have, but it's my understanding that they're interested in purchasing more, that there's some challenges with the electric buses and seeing where federal policy is going on electric. I'm not sure. They may want to choose a different course, but I haven't had deep conversations with them, so I'm not sure where they're at on that.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was wondering, because I thought they were trying to go electric, and it would seem like going natural gas was actually going backwards for their emissions. We mentioned Commissioner Farr mentioned Essex, so it kind of sounds like we lost another partner in this project. I thought Chambers was going to be doing the construction on this. We talked about
Vice Chair,
that.
actually, Chambers is still involved on the bulk handling BHS project side, so they will be constructing the anaerobic digester side of the facility, and that's who they've contracted with. Chambers didn't end up putting in a bid for our side of the project. It was my understanding they had a staffing capacity challenge.
How many people did bid on our project?
We ended up just having the one, Essex General Construction, but we were pleased with the bid that they gave us and the pricing for their fees that would be on top of the guaranteed maximum price.
Do you have any questions or reserve that only one person bid on that project?
Actually, don't, Vice Chair. I think they're a very solid company in the community with a strong reputation, and I think they can deliver this project well.
That'll be it. No.
Anyone else? I've got a few questions. I've had a couple of constituents have some concerns that I said that I would try to help answer some of those questions in the public's purview. We're looking at two separate orders, one from Robertson Sherwood Architects and another for the BHS design, and there's some confusion as to why it was stated earlier that the architects, the Robertson Sherwood Architects was contracted by Bulk Handling Systems to deliver 100% design plans for the entire Clean Lane facility, but then we have another architect firm that's going to do services as well. There's some confusion as to why there's two. Could you clarify that just for that person?
Sure. Great question, Chair. So Robertson Sherwood was actually subcontracted under BHS for the 100% design. Then we will contract with them directly to take the design and develop contract documents, construction documents, and then be working with the contractor through the CMGC process as the designer for the project for needs that come up to change the project along the way.
Okay, great. And then we'd mentioned earlier on too about the contracts and maybe some of the slippings of the timeline, which I totally understand that. I wanted to get my project done a year ago, and here we are, just a few months ago, we got it done. So I get that. But I guess some of the other concerns that the county has is that $12,000 a day penalty if, we get to a point where there's a point of finger blame somewhere where someone's not doing their job. And I'm just wondering, in the business of construction and working together, does the public assure that there's a little bit of wiggle room there, or if we're going to get hung out to dry? I guess that was the question that I had too.
Also a good question. And that may be one of the reasons why we only got one firm to bid on this. I think some of the firms were concerned about the liquidated damages, so the penalties of not meeting the construction timeline. Because the way we have set this up is that the county, if there's fault by the county of causing delay from the project schedule, we would incur a $12,000 a day penalty. We have put that into the contract, so Essex has agreed to this project timeline, and they will be responsible for the $12,000 a day if, for their fault, it goes past the project construction timeline. Those timelines are held until we get the necessary approvals, the permits that we're seeking at this moment.
Okay, great. I got one more question, then I'll go for round two after that, just because I'm kind of bouncing around here a little bit. Now, we started collecting tipping fees in July 1, I believe, wasn't it? July or June 1? I forget. July 1. And I'm just wondering how much revenue is expected from those increased tipping fees over the first year, just out of curiosity.
Jeff might be able to speak to the amount we were projecting, but basically what's happened now is that our revenues are holding flat because our tonnage is declining. And so we're not getting the necessary additional new revenue to put towards building this facility. So that's the challenge we're at, and I think that's going to take some more discussion with the board to figure out what we do about that.
The age-old problem of cash flow, apparently, yeah. Any other questions, comments? Round two? Yes, Commissioner Farr.
I have a couple. Just a couple of general questions, because these are questions that will come up over and over again as we move down the line on the project. At this point in time, just to be sure, the land use and the zoning has not been completed. We don't have a permit for building at this point in time.
Commissioner, we have a special use permit that's been approved, but it has been appealed. And so we're in kind of a holding pattern until we get that approved finally. And that is holding up other permits. We can't get building permits. I'm not even sure we can get the wetland permit until we have that finalized.
So it's under appeal, and do you have an estimate as to how long that will take? I realize that it's nebulous because it's difficult to say exactly how it's argued and how it becomes a.
Very difficult to say, Commissioner. That the stand is, I would anticipate that regardless of the direction of the hearings officials ruling, that either we would appeal that or the appellants would appeal that to the Land Use Board of Appeals. I've heard that a typical appeal to LUBA takes 6 to 9 months, but that's just a very rough timeline.
Which makes the start and end date of construction really, we don't know at this point in time. We have kind of a rough estimate. Okay. The final design, when will we see a final design?
What are we expecting?
It's coming pretty soon here. Do you guys?
If the contract is completed, is approved today, I expect we'll be wrapping that up in the next month.
Okay, so the March-ish date that we saw is roughly.
Yeah.
All right. And then as the cost and scope change, costs go up, those questions will come later, never mind on that one. So the start date, end date, we don't have any definite on that. And the big question, and the one that really nags me, is that we just don't have a place to build it yet. And everybody's aware, everybody in the room is aware that we don't have a place to build it yet. We have high hopes. We know, that we know where we would like it to go, but we really don't know how that process is going to turn out.
That's correct.
We have a lot of big ifs as we move forward, but today we have 3 contracts that are really a part of the process that we're already engaged in, a part of essentially the contract that the initial contract that we have signed, and it's been called, due process or just a necessary part of the steps that we go through. I'll ask a question about all 3 contracts. If we today say, no, we're not going to sign those contracts, what happens then?
If we say we don't sign those contracts, then it puts us at a position where we're potentially delaying the end point of when the project should be completed. And then that wouldn't be the fault of our contractor, that would be the county's fault. So then we're looking at $12,000 a day penalty. But it also starts us down a road towards default on the contract with much higher repercussions.
And the $12,000 a day doesn't start today or tomorrow. It starts as we go past the construction end date.
That's correct.
Or day after that. Okay. I think I'm pretty clear on all of that. Then just a general question that's going to come up over and over again. If it goes over budget for whatever reason, we have, how do we handle that? If for instance, we get a bid from the contractor, Essex, and they find that steel's tripled in price, and it's going to cost them a lot more, what happens to Lane County on that?
Two things, Commissioner. So one is that when we talked about this project and the approvals back in December 2023, we had proposed that there would be 4 years of fee increases, and the board at that time chose to just implement the first 2 years. Mm-hmm. And we were hoping that we'd be able to drive the cost of the project down so that the fee increases in year 3 and 4 wouldn't need to be as high. So we would need to see what those additional year fee increases would need to look like. We would also want to evaluate how much we have in reserve in the waste management division, and how comfortable the board is in dipping into those reserves.
So you've thought through that process, and the contingency is there to discuss future continuation of rate increases or potentially more fee increases. And that incorporates the question if tipping tonnage continues to slide. That's all a part of that same question. Okay, very good. At this point, Chair, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple more. Vice Chair, you please go ahead. Your finger went out fast.
Chair usually goes last. Thanks, Dan. So I'm not concerned who got the project. Essex is great. I think everybody local can agree they are. I am concerned only one person bid on it, though, as I'm sitting up here stewing on this. That tells me possibly there's something wrong with the project. There's something somebody doesn't like. That's unlikely for a project of this magnitude around here. If Essex drops out, nobody else around's bid on it, like, where does that leave us then?
I think we'll have to explore that. We are about to sign a contract with them probably tomorrow or the next day to start the pre-construction services that we would then amend with approval by the board for the construction amount. So I would need to look into the termination provisions of that contract. If they terminated the contract, we would need to go out for bid again, and we may not want to do the CMGC approach, but we would want to finish the construction documents and bid it like a regular project, and we might have more bidders. But I think it's that we have an aggressive project schedule, we have some uncertainty hanging around it, and that liquidated damages issue around completion time.
Okay. And then, so how much does, this is kind of a two-part question. How much would you estimate bulk handling systems has wrapped up into this project so far? I mean,
Vice Chair, they're here to speak to that. I think they're over the $20 million mark in starting with the fabrication of the machinery. But then they also have a contract with Chambers for the construction of the building that could be impacted. I don't feel comfortable estimating beyond that.
okay.
Chair,
Council, go ahead.
Chair, if I may, just for clarification, that's with BHS Projects at Lane County LLC. That's who you meant, just for the record, for the public.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Council. Yeah, appreciate that. Okay. Because as Commissioner Farr said, if we don't approve these contracts, we're not holding this up. It's still held up in land use. We don't have a place to build this thing. So how does the $12,000 a day start getting added on now when we're not holding the project up? There's no place to put the project.
Vice Chair, because we just don't know when those approvals will come. February 14th, the hearings official could say it's approved, and we don't get it appealed to LUBA, and unlikely, but that could happen. And then the other permits fall in short succession after that. Or we're able to work to get a more timely resolution from LUBA, in which case we wouldn't, if we've delayed the contract progress, then we would be at fault.
Gotcha. So if all these things took place and you were still waiting on this decision, then we could possibly be at fault.
Okay, well, I have a few questions on my own as well. You're talking about the hearings official deciding that, and I'm wondering in the appearance of public objectivity and transparency, is our current hearings official going to be deciding that, or are we making other arrangements?
Chair, we are requesting that the board next week approve a hearings official for this that would be separate from any hearings official we've used previously or any connection to any other party. So there was concern that we typically use a hearings official through the Lane Council of Governments. A couple of those hearings officials have prior worked for Lane County, and for the perception of biased, we are proposing that the board sign a contract for a hearings official that's completely independent.
Good, thank you for explaining that, it was great. With all the other kinds of what-ifs and things that we're talking about and all these pie-in-the-sky kinds of concerns that we have, is there any prudence to maybe putting an agreement together that we should put a pause on this for just a little bit, just to make sure that, A, bulk handling system's not spending money that perhaps they don't need to be right now in case we decide to shift gears or change our mind, or, you know, if land use thing doesn't happen and we have to pivot to another space? I mean, is there any prudence just to kind of like put the brakes on this for a few months and both of us agree just to kind of breathe a little bit and get through the hard stuff?
Possibly, Chair. I think I would need to have conversations with bulk handling to see what that would look like on their end. You know, they have obligations that they need to meet on timelines, and I'm not sure that if they would be willing to agree to a pause.
Well, I mean, that's a big ask, I understand. And I think the reason I asked that is just because I kind of winced a little bit when you said we're not getting the tonnages and our revenues are down and all that. That tells me that we're kind of going into a period of, not recession, but we're kind of, you know, not as bulky as we were before as far as revenue goes. And that concerns me because when we're entering into a project of this size, we want to make sure that we have the cash flow to feed this beast ongoing. And so that's why I say, hey, you know, sometimes I get out over my skis too and I develop, and I wish I'd have made a pause, and sometimes I just have to chew like crazy, and I would just hate to see the county just bite off more than they can chew right now and have to chew like crazy later.
Chair, I would be happy to explore that with bulk handling.
Yeah, okay, good. All right, well, I think we are at a place, unless there's any other comments or discussion, where we can entertain a shift in gears on this Red Point construction contract. If you have any comments or comments you want to make here, Dan, about that, we can certainly get through that, so we can put that order to a motion.
We can move to the next one, Chair. It's a
Yes.
Red Point Construction Management. So again, this is to bring on a consultant who can help us manage the project that has CMGC experience and act as our owner's rep. We've talked about this a couple times, but if you have further questions, we can discuss that.
Any questions are asked for Dan? If not, I'm looking for a motion. Yes, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move Order 25-01-23-03 in the matter of approving a contract with Red Point Construction Management LLC to serve as the owner's representative for the construction of the Clean Lane Resource Recovery Facility, and authorizing the county administrator to execute the contract, expense in the amount of $354,810.
I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Chair, I'll second, just with the friendly. I think Commissioner Buck misspoke on the order number, so just to confirm, it's order 25-01-28-03. Either she misspoke or I misheard.
I was thinking the same thing.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Thought
that's
that is what
Thank
I
you.
mentioned.
Great, thank you.
Let's run that in my head. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and we have a motion by Commissioner Buck and a second by Commissioner Trieger in the matter of approving the contract with Red Point Construction. Is there any discussion to the motion? Yes, Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to confirm something. Director Hurley, I think you said last week, last time these matters were before us, and somewhat to some of the questions from some other commissioners. This is a step that we need whether we have to pivot to a new site regardless, because this is what we have to do, both contractually obligated to keep the project moving forward, as well as the activities that would be undertaken, at least initially under this contract, will be relevant and useful to us. They're not site-specific. Is that correct?
That's correct, Commissioner. We would want this project management support. We may not incur expenses to the degree we would, because the majority of this will be during construction for the specific one.
So this is an up to, not an obligating us to the $354,810.
That's correct, Commissioner.
Thank you for that. And finally, just as a fine matter of semantics, saying we don't have a site for this really isn't accurate. We have a site, we've purchased a site, it's been approved. That approval is being appealed by project opposition, but that's not the same as saying we do not have a site. I would not characterize it as such. Would you? Do you have any way to help us think about how to talk about the current status of the site that we in fact have purchased and have approved for this use?
I think you've said that well, Commissioner. We do have a project site. We don't have the final approvals to build on that site, and there are actions that the board can take if there are objections by the Land Use Board of Appeals.
Thank you. And I guess I would just ask our administrator, surely in your 10-plus years here, there have been other instances of capital projects where they've been held up in varying kinds of procedural, but we don't consider that to mean we don't have certainty. We never have certainty about anything. And also whether there have been other instances where I know with providers, there have been instances where we've only had one response to an RFP, but similarly with capital projects, is this rare, unusual, or not that unusual, or?
Gosh, I think that's a hard one to give you a definitive answer on, Commissioner. I would say that this is definitely a unique project in its both the size of the project, the financial investment, and the partnership element, that it's very true that we've entered into a public-private partnership that has a lot of great benefits to it. And it also creates some complications in terms of moving through those things. And I think has been identified where there's opposition, and sometimes we do have opposition to projects, that can create some additional process and hurdles to overcome. So I think that is true, but I think it's also true that we've had other projects in the past that are large in scale, that are complex, and that have had some level of uncertainty to them.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. And, the benefits to this project in general are great. The risks are also great. And part of the risk is that we are waiting for permits, and we don't know if we're going to get those permits approved. Nobody can say that, which means to me that we don't have a site until those permits are approved. So that being said, we're being somewhat speculative on moving forward with these contracts, other than the fact that we are obligated to move forward on these contracts, but by all accounts. So the question I have is, on this contract that we're approving that we're being asked to approve right now, $354,000. When does that money begin being spent?
That will begin immediately, Commissioner. We have project needs now, and to take burden off of Jeff Orlandini, the manager of the Waste Management Division, and his staff to be able to pick up that load.
Okay. And in the event that we can't build in Goshen, and we can't find any place else to build, maybe that's not very likely, but what happens to this 354 if we never build?
And then, Commissioner, I wouldn't anticipate us spending the full amount on that. Because
So some of that we'd lose, but not all of it. Okay, all right. And then, so once again, there are risks involved, and there are risks involved in everything we take. When somebody wants to build a home on a piece of property, and they find the zoning's not quite right, or if Cottage Grove wants to build a road, and they find that they have wetlands involved, they move forward with trying to build it, and ultimately they pay the price to build it. Or in many cases, they say, well, I just don't have time, don't have money, don't have resources. I'm not just at the end of my resources, I'm at the end of my time. So people give up on projects for whatever reason. So with that, we have this contract before us. The step is necessary in moving forward with some of the things that are beginning to happen immediately. So I am prepared to vote. Thank you.
Any other discussion of the motion? Yes, Vice Chair.
Yes, that's a good point. So who did tentatively approve the site, right? Because we have an SUP, or special use permit, sorry, the site approval. Who, between both of those?
Vice Chair, the special use permit went through what's called a Type 2 land use approval, and that goes to the planning director. So the planning director resides in our land management division.
And I don't, pardon my ignorance, I don't know this. Is a special use permit, can that go through like our planning commission? If say on something you were trying to get public input and the optics, is that something?
I don't believe, Vice Chair, that that's the customary process. That's not to say that they're an advisory body to the board, and you could ask them to look at any specific land use issue.
Well, I would agree that we don't have a site. I mean, but going back through our LUBA cases, we're just over 40% with LUBA for being overturned. So I would say we don't have a site yet, and we have some work ahead of us. I'm not going to vote yes for any of these today. I'm going to pause. I'm going to ask for a pause We've got flow control issues, we've got land use issues. It's been stated, we are not holding this up. We are not being fined $12,000 a day until possibly a year when this land use issue is resolved. So there's a lot of variables out there that I don't understand why we can't just pause this project. It's very hard to tell what the private sector is going to do. I mean, there's a reason our tonnage is going down, and there's a reason our tonnage could continue to go down. And at this point, we don't know why. We can speculate why. We also can't solve that problem. We haven't even talked about this as a board and to know what's going on. So I think it's a bad decision to continue moving forward at this point without some of these issues being resolved, but that's me. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments? If not, we have a motion and a second on the floor for Order 25012803. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with a yes.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 3-2.
I
Or
didn't say aye,
You didn't say aye.
but I will. Aye. I was,
my mistake. I thought I heard you say aye. I apologize.
if you call for it
So
again.
let me retract that. The motion did pass, evidently 3-2. Order number 25012803 in the matter of approving contract with Red Point Construction Management, LLC, to serve as the owner's representative for the construction of the Clean Lane Resource Recovery Facility, and authorizing the county administrator to execute the contract expense in the amount of $354,810. On to item C, the order 25012804. If you had any more other comments, Mr. Hurley, please do.
Thank you, Chair. So as discussed, this would be bringing on an architect firm, Robertson Sherwood Architects, and a team of their consultants to help us through the next phase, bringing the 100% design to construction documents and then through the construction process, working with the contractor.
Any questions for Mr. Hurley? Yes, Commissioner Farr.
A couple of questions. The project is not permitted yet, correct?
That's correct, Commissioner.
And we aren't sure what the changes in cost or the scope are going to be. Those questions will arise down the road. We don't have a start date. We don't have an end date that's certain. And we don't have an approved site for construction at this point in time. Okay, those are all givens. So we're speculating once again that all of this will go in our favor down the road. And the next question is, if this is approved, when does the money begin to be spent?
We would start on this one also immediately to keep on track for that construction schedule. So there would likely be a pause after we got through the construction documents to have those ready. There wouldn't be the need for that continuing collaboration with the contractor through construction, but that would be midpoint through the contract.
And in the event the project isn't built, what happens to the money?
Again, Commissioner, like the previous one, we wouldn't spend that money and the money would be available. It would be in that fund specifically for Clean Lane, which fits within the Waste Management Division.
Any other questions for Director Hurley? If not, I'm looking for a motion. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move approval of Order 25-01-28-04 as presented.
And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Buck in the matter of approving a contract with Robertson Sherwood Architects and seconded by Commissioner Trieger. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Did I hear you, Commissioner Farr? Just making sure. Thank you. All those opposed? Nay. Motion passes 3-2. Order 25012804 in the matter of approving a contract with Robertson Sherwood Architects PC to provide design and architect construction and administrative services for the construction of the Clean Lane Resource Recovery Facility and to authorize the county administrator to execute the contract. On to item D, Mr. Hurley. Go ahead, please.
All right, Chair, the third and final is for an amendment to the contract with Emerging Acquisitions LLC doing business as bulk handling systems. Emerging Acquisitions LLC was the initial proposer for the project when we issued the RFP back in 2022. We entered into the contract and have been amending that through the design process. So this is to get us the final way to the 100% design.
Any questions for Director Hurley? Any comments? Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. And Director Hurley, was this, this amount of money or something similar, was it anticipated from the initial,
Thank you
initial
for the
approval of the
question,
first contract?
Commissioner. No, this is above what we had initially anticipated. There have been complexities with this project and a lot of back and forth with agencies, specifically to the wetlands and stormwater. The DEQ in particular is asking for some buffering around the wetlands that hadn't been anticipated, and so some additional design work to accommodate those agency requests.
So this is an example of the increase in scope and/or cost of the project, this 334?
Yes, Commissioner. This one is
This is
187,400.
187 on this one. Okay. And then the increase in cost is completely the responsibility and liability of the county.
That's correct, Commissioner.
If there's no further comments, I'm open for a motion. Yes, Commissioner Buck.
I will move approval of Order 25-01-28-05 as presented.
And a second.
I will second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Trieger on Order 25012805 in the matter of approving the contract amendment with Emerging Acquisitions, DBA Bulk Handling. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 3-2. Order 25012805 to approve the contract amendment with Emerging Acquisitions LLC, DBA Bulk Handling Systems for design and pre-construction services for the Clean Lane Resource Recovery Facility, and authorize the county administrator to execute the contract amendment, expense in the amount of $187,400. We got through it, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your information and your persistence. We appreciate you very much.
Appreciate all your time. Thank you.
Mr. Mokrajski, it comes that time for item 12, Commissioner Business. And I will look to my colleagues and see if there's any announcements that you have. Yes, Commissioner Buck.
I'll just mention that we had a really wonderful celebration in Blue River on Friday. This was the grand opening of the Lazy Days community. It was well-attended, at least 100 people in the pouring rain, of course. It was a huge celebration. Folks will be moving in shortly. And Phase 2, which is the park models, another 10 will be arriving here eventually. And we had just a wonderful showing and a really nice tour in advance of all the different community centers and buildings that have been built to date over the last several years with Oregon Housing and Community Services leadership. And I think that went really, really well. I didn't expect them to spend an entire day down here with us in Blue River, but they did. And we got to meet their new disaster recovery specialist director. And so they have new leadership there with lots of energy. So there was some news coverage, which was wonderful, and the community really turned out.
Great. I just want to comment on that, too. I was on my way to Bend that day and stopped by at 11 o'clock. It wasn't quite raining then, but it was coming in buckets, I could see. And I think what was really interesting was Idea Box, the people that constructed those facilities and those little apartments there really did a custom job for Lane County. They went well beyond what they normally do. And they had built these 2-bedroom units to where when you looked out the windows, you didn't see into somebody else's window. And they really achieved that privacy with all of that cottagey kinds of arrangement. And I got to talk to the architects and the designers, and it's a really, really well-done project. And the people at Homes for Good and Jacob Fox and all the others just did a stupendous job, monumentally conquering challenges on that site. And they should just hold their heads in. We should be really proud of them. So it was a great project, and it's just really great to see it finally come. And the one bedrooms are on the way. That's the ones that you were suggesting, so those are on the way. So, any other announcements? Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Tomorrow afternoon, the MAC group, the Multi-Agency Collaborative, resumes discussions regarding All-In Lane County. All-In Lane County is a process of spending what was last year Governor Kotek's 2302 declaration. Lane County has been acclaimed for how well we did in converting that money and leveraging that money into actual beds, front doors, and places for people to sleep. That group continues to its work tomorrow in the afternoon. So tune in. It's a public meeting. It will take place at DD Services at 3 o'clock tomorrow.
Quite at the end of the day. Is there any future board assignment requests that we should be entertaining? Yes, Commissioner Farr.
This is not a formal request for a report, Mr. Mokrzycki, but just regarding our transient room tax, lodging tax. 2.5 years ago, was it 2.5 years ago, that we approved a 1% increase in the tax, and that 1% has been levied. Levied is not the right word; it's being collected, and we're presumably amassing it, or we're collecting it and putting it into a reserve fund or into a fund. In next week, perhaps, or maybe the week after, not with the formal report, but just in the items from the administrator in your report, can you just let us know what's happening with that 1% of the money that we've been collecting, where it lies, what the future potential uses can be, and just a general or informal discussion as to where we are with that 1%?
Good head nods on that? On that? Yeah, all right, good. Anyone else? Yes, Commissioner Trigger.
Since Commissioner Farr brought that up, I will just say we had our first meeting, the initial meeting of the small group, the large small group, tasked with working on the long-range planning for the Lane Event Center and sort of the visioning and how the community outreach will go. This is sort of the thought partnership group that's a combination of Fair Board member, staff, stakeholder, community groups, and high utilizers, renters of the facility. And so it was just exciting to see that kicked off, just because it's not connected to the assignment that Commissioner Farr just made. So that is underway. It is a 6-month or less process to figure out how to outreach to community and get folks' sense of what they'd like to see that public asset in the middle of a neighborhood, what kind of value add we can do with that property in the future, so that when we come to actually making any decisions about it, we know that our decisions are aligned with what the community visions for that space.
And if I may tag on, it's pretty exciting to see that work moving forward, because it really is, it's a large untapped resource that we have in Lane County. And when I sit and think about what can we do with that amount of resource, that amount of land, where it is geographically, I'm really excited to see the work of this task force.
If I could say, as any youth, can't wait to get their license. I can't wait to see what comes out of this group and do that. All right, Mr. Mokrzycki, is there any review of the assignments?
Well, just that one, and I will say, first, I will not, Mr. Rickoff will be in my seat next week. I'm going to be participating in a university local government panel talking about university government partnerships and highlighting our policy lab with other Big Ten university schools that are interested. There's no other Big Ten, the new Big Ten, there's no other university that has a policy lab structure like we do, where local government is working really so closely with their university to solve local challenges. So they're interested in hearing about that program. So I'm happy to report on that in a couple weeks when I'm back, or at the next board meeting. The other thing I just wanted to note is I committed to the board that I would come in February and give you a list of the work sessions that departments are planning, and then we'd schedule a work session with commissioners to talk about what are we missing, what additional things would you like to see. And so the plan is that I'll come back on February 25th and share with you the list that we have planned, and then we'll schedule some time at a meeting in March for us to dive into that. So, and then the last note is just on the Lane Event Center master planning. I believe we have a work session scheduled for a Wednesday, or are in the process of scheduling that in March. So the board will have that discussion about Lane Event Center I believe around March, and I'll report back to you for that on an update with this TLT that you're asking about, Commissioner.
Great. Is there any other business for the order? If there is not, I will call the regular session of the Board of County Commissioners meeting adjourned.